I am so tired of coming on this podcast every single week and telling you to stop playing T.Y. Hilton. Like, just stop it.
Mikey needs help.
Mikey needs help.
I was like, if you don't have Jeff Wilson in here, and if you don't run it on first down, I'm going to strangle you through that TV.
You should know better than everyone else. That fool tears you up when you plays you.
Yeah, but
Don't you want him on your team?
I have him at number 25.
Thank you. Fine. Todd's the reasonable one on this show.
I take issue with everything he said there.
Well,
I really do.
DeAndre Swift. He's going to break them tackles, son.
That's bold. That's bold. That's putting your nuts on the table right there.
Hey, there's the first time for everything.
Waxing poetic over here with Todd Diamond.
Dude's old.
So what? He's not as old as Brady, and you're jerking him off before the show starts.
I have Sutton in my top 10. I have him at number 9. Yes.
You know what? I'm just canceling the league. I can't do this with you guys. Hello, MHA owners. It's July and time for the 21st season of the Mile High Affiliates to get underway. And what better way than with the MHA podcast? Eric Lansing here with the usual suspects of Mikey Renault and Todd Diamond. What's up, fellas? How are we doing on this? What is this, July 8th, Friday night?
Yeah, doing good. Ready to talk some football. It's been kind of, like I said, quiet, for NFL news in some degree. So it's, it's recently, yes. It's been.
We got a lot of news to cover today, Todd. A lot of news, but it happened earlier in the year.
Yeah, exactly. So, but we've had some good things. We've had some other good things in the sports world happen to help us, bridge the gap a little bit there. So it's good.
Mikey, how are you?
I'm good.
Yeah.
I don't know what other stuff he's talking about. Do he wants to talk about Kevin Durant? This is a football podcast.
No Kevin Durant talk.
No.
I've seen so many trade offers and predictions and all. It's just absolutely nuts. So we'll stick to football here.
No, I was just gonna say the Avs. That's all.
Oh, the Avalanche.
Yes.
Yes, they had a good season, I hear.
Yeah.
I don't think I watched a single Avs game until the finals.
Okay.
I'm not saying I'm a bandwagon Avs fan. I don't watch that much Avs. There's just too much to watch. But I'm happy for them. I was a big fan back when they moved here, and I think I was a fan until I got to college, and then I was like, I didn't have room for hockey after that.
Yeah.
I barely know all the players on the team outside of the all-star guys.
Yeah, I mean the fans were great. The fans were crazy. I went to the parade, so the fans were, jumping and hollering. So it was cool.
Well, guys, I think we should be excited for the Avs as well as the Broncos. Apparently, the Broncos won't be running out the dual threat of Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater. We'll talk about that, but you guys excited for the Broncos 2022 season?
Oh, hell yes. Oh, my God. It only took us 6 years to do it, but hell yes. Oh, my God.
Wow, we got a hell yes from Todd. Mikey, are you excited? Mikey was telling me the other day, because Mikey helps me a lot at work at Metro with games and whatnot. He goes, Eric, I don't know if I can work Sundays anymore. there's a lot of hype and excitement. So, Mikey, Broncos season, huh?
Yeah. Hey, I tell you what, like the primetime games, now that we have more of them, I'm all yours.
Perfect.
It's nighttime.
Yeah, there's some nights, but usually we don't work on those nights. Fingers crossed. We'll see how it goes. Okay, what's coming up on the show? A lot. We're going to try to get to as much as we can. We'll try to keep it around an hour, maybe a little bit. We're in the summer, so it's not too bad. But a lot of movement. Of course, this is it's been wild off season, hectic, and it's been fun. And so, of course, we'll talk about all the movement in the off season. Some MHA trivia. I didn't put that on your list, but I came up with some. So we'll have some MHA trivia, old faces in new places, as we mentioned. And we will not talk about the NFL draft. We're going to do that on the next episode. So we have a whole episode just talking about the NFL draft, rookies, and all that fun stuff. Okay, Let's get to some news and notes. Todd loves the draft, so he'll be excited about that one. But we're excited about the first podcast this season. So in the news,
this reporter was possibly a little hasty earlier. Would like to reaffirm his allegiance to this country and its human president. May not be perfect, but it's still the best government we have. For now.
Stephon Diggs, he stays where he's at. Signs with the Buffalo Bills, 4 years, $96 million. So it's great for him, especially for Josh Allen and those Buffalo Bill fans. Other wide receiver news, DeAndre Hopkins will miss the first 6 games of this season after violating the league's policy on performance-enhancing substances. The news came out in May. Injuries kind of derailed his 2021 season, setting career lows in receptions, yards, but did catch 8 touchdowns, so kind of helped out the owners for fantasy owners last season in his 10 games played. Some other news, of course, probably should have let off with this one, but I'm not a big fan. Tom Brady comes out of retirement, does so on Selection Sunday for March Madness, so screw that guy. Terry McLaurin recently signed a 3-year extension with the Commanders. I'm still getting used to that, by the way. He's now the 5th highest paid wide receiver in the league. And this past Wednesday, some breaking news. The Browns traded Baker Mayfield to the Panthers. You guys excited about that move?
No.
Let's move on. No. We'll talk about it on the quarterbacks episode. How about that? Okay, let's get to those old faces in new places. And we'll start with, of course, quarterbacks, especially for us Bronco fans. After failing on the draft pick of Drew Lock and failing to go split duty between Lock and Teddy Bridgewater, the Broncos finally got a quarterback that can play in this league, and trading for Super Bowl champion Russell Wilson from the Seahawks. Mikey, I'm asking you first because I can only imagine the numbers Todd is going to pull out of his keister when I ask him about it. But what can us fans expect from the Broncos offense this season? We seem to have a respectable wide receiver core. At least we pay it as such. So with Russell Wilson in tow, what can we expect?
It changes all aspects of what we're trying to do. It makes the running game better. It'll make the wide receivers better. I don't necessarily think it's going to really help the tight ends because I don't think we've got like a lot there, at least when we're talking fantasy. But like, I'm very high on both Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon. I think both of them can have good seasons. The receivers, they're going to be better, but it is such a tough question, and Todd's going to answer it for you, which one he thinks benefits the most. I'm more trying to figure out which one is going to be the worst one, because I believe that not all 3 of them are going to be good, and one of them is going to flop.
Yeah, for those who follow Seattle Seahawks, it's been a lot of DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett and not much else. And Russell Wilson doesn't really go to his tight ends, or maybe it's just because he hasn't had great tight ends in Seattle either. But yeah, you might, if it's based on what we've seen. Now he has a different offensive play caller. Nathaniel Hackett's going to be calling those plays. So coming over from Green Bay, maybe they utilize more 3-4 wide receiver sets, or at least get more involved. But Todd might answer Mikey's question. Who, is it going to be the 2? Which one is going to be? They have 3 respectable wide receivers, or at least on paper. We've seen Cortland Sutton do some good things in Denver. Jerry Jeudy was a 1st-round draft pick, and with those quarterbacks, he didn't really mesh, and he has had a lot of drops in his first 2 years. We have Patrick, who's around as well. So who should fantasy owners be looking at when they start preparing for their fantasy drafts?
When I was kind of thinking between Jeudy and Sutton, and I want to say Sutton because we maybe finally really see his full potential and what he can do. Because it's decent when we had actually below quarterback play, but it's Jerry Jeudy. It's Jerry Jeudy, and it's more of, kind of toward the beginning of his, we first drafted him, and even this year, there was whispers of him like, well, it doesn't matter who's the quarterback, and they just need to get me the ball. Well, Broncos got a quarterback that can get him the ball, and I think Jerry Jeudy, we will see as his 3rd year, we will see the Jerry Jeudy, the Alabama Jerry Jeudy.
Whoa. Let me breathe for a second.
Oh, God,
let me breathe. Let me just take a deep breath.
All right, Mikey, take a deep breath.
The audience will know I am not the biggest Tyler Lockett fan in the world, but I believe you're being disrespectful. Like, you're basically calling Tyler Lockett and Doug Baldwin garbage. What have any of these 3 Broncos receivers really proven? I think that's a fair question.
Sutton's at least shown some flashes, Patrick was probably our most consistent wide receiver last year, and that was with bad quarterback play. But you give a weapon like Jerry Jeudy and what his potential can be and what he's shown he can do. And granted, it's college. I know it's college and the NFL it's two different worlds. I get that. I'm not knocking that, but I'm just saying you give a weapon to Russell Wilson like Jerry Jeudy where he, like I said, you put him on the outside, the slots. Again, the best route runner coming out of college, and that's where I think where we're finally going to get the full potential, at least for the most part, in his third year out of Jerry Jeudy.
That P word is a dangerous word. Here's my thing with Jeudy. I disagree with you. I think it'll end up being Sutton.
Mm-hmm.
Part of my reasoning is I don't see the Broncos playing like an exclusive 3 wide receiver set.
Mm-hmm.
Like we've seen the Shanahan offense before. We know a lot of times it runs 2 tight ends.
Mm-hmm.
They signed Patrick and Sutton to be the 2 outside receivers, which puts Jeudy in the slot, which makes me think he's not going to be on the field as much as the other 2. There's things that he does that tells me that he's not going to be. He wasn't a good blocker. He didn't finish up on routes last year. He's had off the field problems. He's had nagging injuries all this offseason. I don't know. Mock drafts agree with you, Todd, because of the potential.
Mm-hmm.
But they've done that the last 2 years as well with him.
But Mikey, let me ask you this before we get to MHA trivia. Last season, Wilson didn't put up big numbers. He played in 14 games, threw over just 3,000 yards, had 25 touchdowns, finished 21st in our scoring, and that's because he missed some of the games. But he didn't have the season he had a couple years ago. So is there any concern as if we're talking about drafting a quarterback? And I didn't tell you guys to really do rankings, but does this he's kind of, and we'll talk about the MHA trivia here in a second, but does he loft him up into your rankings, or do you kind of keep him in the similar spot? Do you drop him because he's in a new place with maybe weapons that weren't as good as DK and Tyler Lockett? But how do you kind of see him as a fantasy quarterback and drafting him?
Well, I with him, I look at it as more the situation's a little more stable here. So I believe that he'll be better than he was last year. But there's concern for me only in the fact that this is a totally new coaching staff, totally new place. You know how these things work. It takes time. So, the first half of the season, things are not going to be like hunky-dory. It's going to take time to kind of work out the kinks. He's never played with these guys before. So,
yeah,
I mean, I don't think I can. He's not a top 5 guy for me. I'll tell you that.
Todd, yes or no? Is he a top 5 guy for you?
No.
Okay. He does have the 5th easiest quarterback schedule for quarterbacks. Take that for what it's worth. But let's talk about Russell Wilson in some MHA trivia. This is going to be quick because we have a lot to catch up to. We spent a lot of time on Russell Wilson, but we'll finish it off with, we talk about fantasy value. Has Russell Wilson ever finished first among all quarterbacks scoring in any single season in our league?
No.
So you guys can tell me yes or no.
I'll say yes.
I'll say no.
And the answer is yes, he finished first back in 2017. He finished with 738 points, which doesn't sound like a lot, but he was the best quarterback that year. In fact, even though he had 808 points 2 years ago and he had 40 touchdowns, he ended up finishing 5th there. He finished 21st last year, 5th 2 years ago, 4th in 2019, 15th in 2018, and 1st in 2017. Yeah. And he's entering his 11th season now. So I still think there's fantasy value there. I think it'll just be interesting to see where our league is full of Bronco fans. So it'll be interesting to see their thoughts as we go along. Okay. So we could talk more about Russell Wilson when we get to the quarterbacks episode, but we got a lot more movement to go. And speaking of quarterbacks, Texans quarterback Deshaun Watson was traded to Cleveland. Despite the allegations against the quarterback, he signed a 5-year, fully guaranteed $230 million contract. Holy cow. Now we're not here to talk about all the allegations. We're here talking mostly about the fantasy ramifications. So Todd, if Watson plays in 2022, how excited are you for the Browns offense that we know really kind of revolves around a great offensive line and an RBI, and a running back duo?
Well, if Watson plays, he's obviously definitely a big upgrade over Baker Mayfield. I'll tell you that right now. Now, obviously, it helps having Nick Chubb, who's one of the best running backs in the league, and so forth. Mari Cooper situation is interesting. You know, is he a top 10 wide receiver? No, I mean when you
I don't think Watson is a wide receiver at all.
no Cooper. Sorry, I'm saying
Oh,
Cooper.
we're
Sorry.
not talking about Cooper. We're talking about Watson.
I know, but if Watson play, like I said, if Watson plays, yes, it definitely helps that Browns offense. It opens up opens the running game up a lot and so forth. But yes, if he plays, obviously that's a big what if, because we're still waiting on a lot of stuff. But if he
as a fantasy owner,
but if he,
I mean, are you excited if he plays? Are you going to think about drafting him? Like, how high are you going to draft him? This is a guy who he didn't play in 2021, but he finished sixth the year before, seventh the year before that, ninth. So he's been a top 10 quarterback since he's got into the league outside of his rookie year. But once he's played all as a starter the entire season, he's been a top 10 guy as high as sixth. He led the league in passing yards just a few years ago. So when you see him on the Browns, you see the guys he has on his team, does that get you excited? Does that make you want to draft him in the top 5? Or is he a guy you see outside your top 10 and not excited to have?
I see him I see him outside my top 10. And that's just more of, I think the Browns are still going to lean on that running game a little bit. Now, again, you put Watson in that equation, it opens a lot of things up. But I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence a little bit. Whether I draft him as my first quarterback if he was still there. I don't know. It's just a very tricky situation, because if you draft him now, obviously we'll know, just for grins, we'll know before the start of the season if he plays. If he plays, then that kind of your mindset changes a lot more. Then you're like, okay.
That's my question to you. If he plays, is there any excitement to have Watson on your fantasy team? Yes or no?
No.
Okay. So Mikey, Todd said he'd have him outside his top 10, but if he plays this year, how do you view the quarterback?
I was surprised Todd didn't say he wouldn't touch him with a 10-foot pole. I was expecting it.
I love it.
If he plays, gosh, that's tough. I see that being almost impossible, that he plays a full 17, but I'm going to go with your question because that's the way that you asked it.
Correct.
It's possible he's in my top 10. I have at least 8 that I know I would take in front of him. And I have 2 kind of maybes. So he's right on the fringe, because for me, Josh Allen, Burrow, Mahomes, Herbert, Prescott, Brady, Murray, Stafford. Those are the 8 that I would say, yeah. Russell Wilson, Lamar Jackson, maybe.
Maybe the better question is, can he put up the numbers we've seen him put up in the past? Now he's played with some respectable wide receiver cores, some running backs that didn't amount to much, or the off and on quarterback coach situation over there. But I mean, can he, if everything falls into place for him, he's shown he could be a top level quarterback in this league.
I'm gonna say no, and here's why. So much of what Houston was about with him was about him. Like, he was a big time do everything kind of quarterback because he had to over there. The Browns are built a little bit differently. It's a team that's got, a pretty good defense. They've got, that's one of the best running games in the league with a really good offensive line. Like, I don't think he's going to be forced into being the full center point of that team and having to score 30 points for his team to win.
But fully guaranteed $230 million to just hand the ball off.
No, and I'm not saying to just hand the ball off, but
You're expecting him to win games for you.
right. But you know what I'm saying? Like before with Houston, there was a stat a few years ago I saw. It wasn't this past year, obviously, because he didn't play, but the year before, where like he led the league in like come from behinds in the fourth quarter because Houston, defense was terrible and he had to basically do everything. He would have to score, 30 to 35 points, like real actual points for the Texans to win games. Now he's in a position where he doesn't have to do that. He can still get like 250 to 300 yards with 2 touchdowns, which maybe doesn't get you 50 to 55 fantasy points, but it gets the team a win.
Yeah. I like any quarterback that can make Will Fuller look good. No, I'm just kidding. I just love talking about Will Fuller. I don't know how I got him into the show, but I did. See, it was great. So we'll see. We have a lot more to go on, but I mean, that'll be interesting to see. I agree. In the whole spectrum, he probably won't play this year. That's why it's fully guaranteed. But I mean, that's a lot of money, and he's shown he could play at a high level in this league. But we'll see how it all plays out as we get closer. All right, we got to talk about Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, 2 really good quarterbacks. This might be more mediocre talk if you're Mikey Renault. How about the situation in Indianapolis? The Colts acquired longtime Falcons signal caller Matt Ryan in a trade and did so for a 3rd-round pick. And how about Super Bowl hero Nick Foles, also in the quarterback fold, signing a 2-year deal. Mikey, I don't know if this is really a quarterback battle in Indianapolis. Boy, I'm just having a rough time. Got to shake the rust off here. Seems like Matt Ryan is the front runner, but I know how much you just love Matty Ice. Do you have a faith in him or any of these guys and making that offense a little better, at least better than with what Carson Wentz showed us last year?
It'll be better from like an efficiency and maybe like a better record on the field. But from a fantasy perspective, no, it's not a battle. They traded enough draft capital I think it's safe to assume that Matt Ryan's going to be the starter. But they didn't really do anything to improve their team, like on the outside with the receivers. Like they pretty much still just have Michael Pittman Jr. and a bunch of garbage on their team. The team runs through Jonathan Taylor as well it should. He's, one of the top 2 or 3 running backs in the game. Adding Matt Ryan just means that he's a little bit better than Carson Wentz, but really not much else. I mean, I can't really put that much faith into him. I mean, they have a better offensive line than Atlanta did, but the weapons are terrible for as far as receivers go.
Todd, talk about those weapons. Talk about Michael Pittman a little bit. And is there anybody else that fantasy owners should keep an eye on outside, of course, Jonathan Taylor, but more of the receiving threats?
Yeah, I think just Pittman. Why do I keep saying Pittman? Pittman. There we go.
Because you're watching NBA basketball on your TV right now.
No, I think Sports Center. Anyway, it's baseball in there. Anyway, but no, I think like you said, there's not a whole lot, but I think Michael Pittman Jr. will be the focal point. Obviously, it's still going to be Jonathan Taylor for the running game, but that's who I think. Actually, a little bold prediction. I think he might be a breakout wide receiver this year. Because obviously, when you bring in Matt Ryan, who has been to a Super Bowl, has won an MVP, for whatever that's worth, when you're doing that, it changes the mindset in the locker room just a little bit. Like, okay, he's been he's been to the mountaintop here and obviously didn't win it, but that helps out a little bit. So I mean, it's still going to run through Jonathan Taylor because their offensive line is just phenomenal. So that's where I think the Colts offense is going to be at this point.
All right, we'll keep it moving here with Big Ben retiring. Who will be standing behind the center in 2002 for Pittsburgh? Well, they did sign the services of Mitchell Trubisky. Cool. So with the Colts, they were done with Carson Wentz. And after one season, dealt the quarterback Off to Washington for a couple of third-round picks. So Matt Ryan out of the picture. Who's the signal caller in Atlanta? Well, as of the moment, it's Marcus Mariota. Neat. Who is the backup? Desmond Ridder, who is the 2022 third-round pick from the University of Cincinnati. So now the quarterback battle in Seattle with Russell Wilson gone. Drew Lock and recent signee Geno Smith. Oh, man, the stock of DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett maybe just plummeting.
Oh, my
So,
God.
guys, Mariota to Atlanta, Geno Smith, and Locke to Seattle, Wentz to Washington, and Trubisky to Pittsburgh. Is there anything we need to talk about here? Or maybe even Teddy Bridgewater with the Dolphins. Anybody fantasy-wise, these guys we should keep an eye on?
No, because I'll say this: Ritter's going to win that job for Atlanta. I'll tell you that right now. Mariota, Ritter's going to win. Ritter's going to win that job. I'll put a bold prediction for that one. That Ritter's going to win. The job.
I'll board bet it right now.
Oh, are we doing a board bet in July?
I think Ritter's going to win. I think Ritter's going to. No way that they put Mariota at this point when they know they're in a rebuild. No, they'll put Ritter will win that job somehow, some way. It may not be.
Let's board bet it. Let's do it.
All right.
I'm writing it down. Board bet it. If you go to ESPN and on their depth chart, they have Mariota as the leader, but obviously nothing's happened so far. So, but Mikey is saying Marcus Mariota is going to be the starter as of the moment.
Yes.
And Todd says Ritter's going to win that job. So if we're saying win that job, it's going to be who takes the first snap of the 2022 season in game one. Is that how we're deciphering this?
That's who wins the job.
Todd, do you agree with that?
Yeah.
All right. Write it up. I've got it down. First board bet of the season. I love it. So there you go. Anything that you want to say about any of these guys? Mikey, Mariota, Geno Smith, Drew Lock, Carson Wentz, Trubisky, Teddy Bridgewater?
None of them are starters. Like, Wentz is probably a capable backup. Like, Washington's offense is okay for him to pretty much like do what he did last year. The rest of the guys are kind of trashy. Like, they'd be like streamer options, basically.
Okay. Just wanted to throw those names out there that they've moved, a lot of quarterback movement. And speaking of, I didn't mention this before, but Mikey won MHA trivia. Good job. Mikey's 1-0 on that Russell Wilson thing. So good job. Wide receivers. Holy crap. We may spend the rest of the episode talking about these guys. And it's not the biggest signing, but it might be the biggest in terms of what changed in terms of the landscape of the NFL world. The Jacksonville Jaguars decided to splurge on the services of Christian Kirk coming out of okay seasons with Arizona. The Jags thought 4 years and $72 million was a bright idea. And then the NFL world changed after that. Mikey, how did that signing kind of, changed how the NFL, the owners, the coaches, how the draft went in terms of wide receivers shaking up the entire NFL world?
Well, I mean, teams like Jacksonville tend to do stupid stuff all the time. It was just a pretty bare free agent market. So Christian Kirk kind of right place at right time getting the money. But what it did is all these other guys who had recently signed deals already, like, Stephon Diggs and Tyreek Hill, saw the kind of money he was making. And all of a sudden it's just like a domino effect where it's like, well, if he's making that, there's no way I can only be making this. And then it just kind of catapulted where, you saw Terry McLaurin, AJ Brown, Tyreek Hill, all these guys getting new deals, and Deebo Samuel wanting a new deal. And then when the draft happened, teams had to make a choice. It's like either pay up for your dudes or draft rookies, and we're kind of seeing you're either doing one or the other.
Yeah,
right. Go ahead, Todd.
I was just gonna say with that. I mean, we were all there on draft night. I mean, holy crap! Obviously, we'll probably talk about it in the draft podcast, but just say, I mean, holy crap! I mean, that's why the draft is more exciting than Pro Bowl is. I mean, the splurge and the different trades and things going back and forth for wide receiver was insane in the membrane. I mean, it was just how it was just more of just how quickly everything was just like boom, 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 boom. It was just, they were changing the NFL landscape, just on that night alone and Mikey brought up a good point. Some of these, some of these teams that already signed their wide receivers to the deals, like they probably had a crystal ball or saw into the multiverse or something and said, "Oh, we look at what's going to happen. So we better pay these wide receivers now, and the market's kind of at a standstill a little bit, and then look at what happens. So just something.
Well, I think yes, a signing that was probably above market and everybody follows suits. But in terms of the way the NFL looks at wide receivers has changed, or at least for the time being, right? I mean, you're talking 6 wide receivers were selected in the first round in the first 20 picks, which is a record.
Yeah.
But the way the NFL views them is different in terms of the way they put them in terms of numbers on the field, in terms of how teams are trying to stop them and slow them down. For them to put the type of money, like we've never seen wide receivers get paid this much. And then, we saw trades take place. We'll talk about A.J. Brown, who has done a great job in Tennessee, but they felt like, well, we can't afford him. So we're going to trade him to get a high draft pick in the first round. They pick a wide receiver. And so it to me, it's mind boggling. Now I read a story on ringer.com. I was trying to figure out more about like, why did this happen? And this story talks about how, in terms of defending more competent receivers, kind of quote here, a defense can't throw double teams at every pass catcher on the field. So unless the pendulum swings back in the other direction and offenses try to punish defenses with power run games, which is increasingly unlikely given the growing influence of analytics in the NFL, the value of a good receiver will only continue to increase. So I don't know if what happened with Christian Kirk was a panic mood or panic move. And then everybody else just said, oh, crap, how are we going to afford Devontae Adams? We can't. We'll trade him. Or let's sign Cedric Wilson, who was the number, 4 wide receiver for Cowboys, who got 3 years and $23 million per. Like, for that to change, I don't know. I don't know if it's a situation. You talk about Cincinnati. They got to the Super Bowl, right?
Yeah.
And they had 3 pretty talented wide receivers. Is that how the NFL is changing?
Well, and also too, and I think I think some degree too, it's gonna also be a year by year basis. I think.
Well, no, it can't be year by year.
Well, but like
you're valuing the NFL draft as a 3, 4, 5, 6 year.
But I think
down the line, you're trading guys because you can't afford them, not just because you can't afford them this year. The NFL is making more money than ever. But it's the way the league is viewing the position of wide receiver, and it's changed immensely.
But I think also too, they looked at it too of how strong, like maybe like a certain position class, how strong the wide receiver class was. That they like if the wide receiver class wasn't as strong as they're projecting it, who knows if the Titans were like, well, there's no really the wide receiver class isn't really as good this year, so maybe we need to pay A.J. Brown because. The rookies.
But that can't be right. That can't be right because you just drafted 6 wide receivers in the first round, right?
Well, in this case, this year.
Go ahead.
I would say in this case, this year the wide receiver class was really strong. So they're like, well, these rookies look really look really ready to go now, and we don't have to, we barely have to pay them. So I think coming into this year to some degree, whether or not it was time for a lot of these wide receivers to get paid, if teams were like, well, we really don't believe, that this wide receiver class is that strong and can contribute right away, and we want to win, so maybe we need to pay A.J. Brown. They the Titans needed to pay A.J. Brown instead of trading him.
And we'll talk about the biggest contract signing and a guy moving from one place to another, and that's Devontae Adams, who maybe they felt they couldn't afford after paying Aaron Rodgers all that money, so they ended up trading him to the Raiders. Of all the teams, the Raiders. How about that AFC West? Goodness. And then he signed a new contract covering 5 years, averaging close to $30 million per season, which was the highest in the NFL for a hot second. Hunter Renfrow also cashed in, not that he's moving anywhere, but he also had a really good year last season with 123 receptions. So, Mikey, what is the value of Devontae Adams now in Las Vegas, and is he still one of the elite guys?
He is still one of the elite guys, but I don't think there's any way that his value can be as good or higher as it was in Green Bay. You just can't replace 7 years or 8 years of chemistry with one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And I know he's going back to his old college quarterback, but he's also going to a new head coach with a new system. The Raiders have their next two guys, Hunter Renfro and Darren Waller, are a lot better than anything that Green Bay had around Adams. So, I mean, just based on that, I feel like a lesser quarterback with better weapons around him for me would mean that his numbers would go down a little bit.
So, Todd, in terms of, I didn't ask you guys to put together rankings at all, but when you think about Devontae Adams and you think about wide receivers, and it's not Jamar Chase because we know you love him, but where would you put Devontae Adams? Is he a top 5 guy, a top 10 guy?
To me, in my rankings, he's still the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy. I get it. He's going from Aaron Rodgers to Derek Carr. I mean, it's kind of difference going between a Ferrari to an Oldsmobile, maybe. No, it's not maybe the best analogy, but just because it just seems like Devontae Adams consistency. I always say that word with a lot of things is just consistent, and he, they try to, double team, triple team, whatever the case may be, and somehow, some way, they get him the football. Now, granted, he's going now into a division where talk about a gauntlet. I mean, it's whether it's the quarterbacks or the defenses, it's going to be tough. But I think Devontae Adams at this point now is, I don't want to say quarterback proof, but I still think he can still be consistent and put up high numbers, and so forth.
I agree that Adams is great on his own.
Mm-hmm.
I think the question is, do we trust Derek Carr? Yes or no, Mikey, Todd? Do you trust Derek Carr to put up maybe not what he was using before, but top 10 numbers?
I do actually. Just he's a Raider. I trust Derek Carr. I trust him. I think it. Yeah, I trust him.
Mikey,
So trust him to do what?
get the ball consistently to Adams, where us fantasy owners are going to be happy about it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean that's fine. Yeah, I think he's capable of doing that. Sure.
What did you think I meant? Trust him with my girlfriend, or
Well,
trust him with my car, or trust him with my mortgage?
No, I thought there was going to be like a leading question is like, do I think he could be a top 10 quarterback or something like that?
No. We'll talk about Derek Carr in a different on the quarterbacks episode, but I think it's a matter of if you believe Carr can put up numbers that are going to be able to suffice Waller, Renfro, and Adams, or I mean specifically Adams. That's what we're talking about. He's the one that's over there. So when we're not drafting Adams as he's connected with Aaron Rodgers, he's a top 5 pick, a top 12 pick. Now he's with Derek Carr. Does he go outside of the first round now? I don't know. I think being paired with Derek Carr, is the reason why you have to think about that.
I agree, and I think he's a fringe first rounder, but he was before too. So
yeah, well, we'll talk more about it when we get to the wide receiver episode in terms of where we actually had him when we actually have rankings. But fun fact, did you know Mr. Carr and Mr. Adams were teammates in college?
yeah, I mentioned that.
Did you mention that?
Mm-hmm.
I sure did.
Oh, I'm sorry. I must not have heard that part. Yeah, they played together from 2012 to 2013 and connected for 233 receptions, 3,000 yards, and 38 touchdowns. So maybe there'll be something in that. Another big wide receiver move, Tyreek Hill. I don't know why anybody would want to leave Patrick Mahomes, but he does. He going to hang out with the Dolphins, and Tua signed a 4-year, $120 million deal. Now he's the highest paid wide receiver. Todd, while the money was good for Tyreek Hill, was it good for him and us fantasy owners in terms of the numbers we usually come to expect from Mr. Tyreek Hill?
There will be a big drop off. You're going from Patrick Mahomes, who the best quarterback in the league, to Tua, where there's still we still don't know if Tua can be that consistent quarterback. So now is Tyreek Hill dropping him all, top 20, top 30. No, not that far. But he's not a top 5 wide receiver anymore.
How do you see Tyreek Hill, Miguel? Last year, Tyreek Hill finished 4th amongst wide receivers, had 111 receptions, close to a little over 1,200 yards, 9 touchdowns. Now paired up with Tua, still young in his career, trying to figure things out. We'll see how the offense is going to work around Tyreek Hill, but how do you see the kind of, I don't know if you want to call him enigmatic wide receiver, but obviously leaving Mahomes for a whole pile of cash says something about a guy.
This is what's funny to me is I agree with Todd in the sense that he won't be as good as he will in Kansas City, but so what? Like, I don't think he'll be drafted much differently because of it. Like, I tried looking at, receivers, and I mentioned earlier that there's that lack of elite, like those big time elite guys.
Mm-hmm.
I tried coming up with, even with the situational change, like 10 guys I could feel strongly about putting above him, and I can't do it. Like, there's not it's not there unless you want to like say take a chance on saying, oh, maybe Terry McLaurin could be better than him, maybe AJ Brown could be better than him, maybe, but I wouldn't count on it.
How many wide receivers, Mikey? Okay, if it's not 10 wide receivers, how many wide receivers would you put ahead of Tyreek Hill?
Well, I mean, you can't throw him on the spot. We didn't ask anybody to do rankings.
Well,
You
but
can't-
I'll tell you what. I
I'll tell you
started
what.
my rank. Go
You
ahead.
can throw me on the spot because I actually went through the process.
Okay.
And I wrote down, let's see, I wrote down 3, 6, 7, 8. I wrote down 9 guys that right now I'd be okay with taking above him, which
Okay.
still puts him at 10.
Okay.
But even as a top 10 wide receiver, I mean, what does that make him? That makes him still like what, third
Late
round?
second round, early for third, yeah.
Right. So, even with that change and even with Tua instead of Mahomes, like the value, you still have to take him late second, early third.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I mean, I started my rankings. I just quickly went through it the last couple of days. I have him 10th. And even then, I don't kind of feel good about it in terms of, I don't know if he's too high or too low because of, you're right, the top. I was thinking the same thing when I was working on it. I was like, there's not a lot of top elite guys here.
Me and you are on the same page because it's the same thing. I had that same feeling. I don't feel good about it, but I don't know if I can lower him, and I don't know if I can raise him. So.
It's an interesting dynamic. The thing I'll say as we continue on is, Tua is still trying to figure out the league. He's not great. He hasn't been consistent throwing the ball downfield, which obviously Tyreek Hill excels at. But all you need to do is get Tyreek Hill in space, and that dude can cause a lot of damage with a pass behind the line of scrimmage or 2 yards in front of the line of scrimmage, and he can score from there too. So there's still a lot to like about him. He's just not going to be, obviously, when you're paired up with Mahomes and what he's capable of doing, especially as many times as they throw.
Yeah.
And we'll see. And I'm not a big fan of the running game for the Dolphins, but that's another episode. Okay, let's talk about AJ Brown. He leaves Tennessee, heads to Philadelphia in a trade. AJ Brown just finished his 3rd season with the Titans. He's coming off a season where he played in 13 games, caught 63 balls, 869 yards, and 5 touchdowns. He did have 8 touchdowns as a rookie and 11 in 2020. But now we'll have Jalen Hurts as his quarterback. Mikey, why would the Titans trade Brown? And is Philly a good place for him fantasy-wise?
Well, the why is an easy one. They traded him because they didn't want to pay him. That's the only reason. It's not because he's not talented. This was all a financial transaction. As far as Philly being a good landing spot, I think it's a similar landing spot. Philadelphia was one of the most run-heavy teams in the league, just like Tennessee. Jalen Hurts goes off script and runs a lot, just like Tannehill does sometimes. The only difference between the two for me is that now, like, and I was completely wrong in this last year. I thought like Julio would be like a threat to him in Tennessee. Devonta Smith in Philadelphia might actually be. He's an up and coming rookie last year. Like, this is all about Jalen Hurts. Like if he improves as a quarterback and doesn't go off script as much, then it's a good move for AJ Brown. But otherwise, I just think it's a lateral move.
I get that. I'll let Todd answer his question first, and I'll tell you what we were talking about, or what something that you mentioned. I'll get back to, but so Mike or Todd, Mike, you mentioned Devonta Smith, and now AJ Brown in the mix. I know you were a big Devonta Smith guy coming out of college, but I mean, is AJ Brown like the top guy for sure, or is Devonta Smith going to eat into some of the targets that we all hope he can get?
I think it's AJ Brown will be the number one wide receiver, just because of I think just how much, because obviously how much the Eagles are are paying him. So I think AJ Brown will be the number one target, and I think too it will benefit Devonta Smith a little bit too as well. But I think AJ Brown will get the majority of the targets, receptions and touchdowns. So
Do
I
you
think
like AJ Brown?
I do like AJ Brown. I think especially going into a situation where in a new place, knowing in Tennessee where it was run, Derrick Henry all day, every day. Now I think in a situation where, we can maybe see a different part of AJ Brown where, you know, see the big physical wide receiver that he is, and I think Jalen Hurts will get him the ball. The fact that I think it just kind of just shows, to Jalen Hurts, like, hey, we're gonna help you. Here's a nice big target for you to throw it to. So I think AJ Brown will benefit the most between him and Smith.
See, this is where I disagree. So Todd said, well, Tennessee getting away from Tennessee, the run heavy. So this is the statistic. So Tennessee was the most run heavy team in the league. They had 551 attempts.
Jeez.
Philadelphia was second. They had 550.
Yeah, see,
It was a difference of one attempt.
And you said this is rush attempts?
Yes.
Really?
So that was interesting because that was my stat was on the passing end. So in 2021, the Titans were 26th out of 32 teams in pass attempts. And guess where the Eagles ranked in pass attempts? Dead last. They had 494 attempts. Tom Brady had 485 completions in 719 attempts. So yeah, the Eagles.
It's just not that. The Eagles had the most rushing touchdowns of any team in the league, which hurts AJ Brown.
Yeah, well, apparently it wasn't to Miles Sanders because they didn't want to give him the football much. But, but I think in this case, AJ Brown will help that and move the Eagles out of that, dead last for.
I think Jalen Hurts is still young. He's still figuring things out. He's trying to get better. And I mean, they were 9-8, so they had a winning record last year too. So I think there's room for improvement in the offense. But and you talk about the rankings. I mean, I have AJ Brown 12th. I don't feel great about it, but who am I going to put above him, right? So he's got elite talent. He's never been a guy to put up a lot of receptions. He's always been a touchdown guy, and there's room for fantasy rosters for that. Okay, continuing to move on. We'll have to kind of pick this up a little bit. We're just about an hour, maybe a little less than that. But in terms of former Cowboys wide receiver Amari Cooper, also on the move this offseason. The former Raider, now former Cowboy, was traded to the Browns to pair up with Watson, as we kind of alluded to earlier. Cooper finished 28th in our scoring 1 year ago. Todd, does this move to Cleveland improve your stock on Cooper, or the same, or does it drop?
I mean, obviously, this question, you have to preface it with the fact if Watson's going to play or not. But I wasn't really a big fan of Cooper to begin with anyway, because obviously when he was with, in Dallas.
Preach.
Yeah, so put it
Eric's
been
the Cooper guy.
Yeah, I was gonna say you're Eric.
How
You're
does
the
Eric
Cooper
feel
guy.
about it? That's what really should be the
Yeah,
question. Because I've always been a Cooper guy.
that's the question. How are you feeling? No, no. I don't know. My perception and how I feel is it really hasn't changed much because if he couldn't really flourish. I mean, not flourish, but he did. But like how let me rephrase that. If he can put up, really do well in Dallas with Dak, who again we agree is definitely one of the elite quarterbacks in the league. But no, this doesn't move the needle for me. I mean, even if Watson plays, it really doesn't do anything for me. And again, I'm just not a big Amari Cooper fan. So
Sure. I'm surprised you said it didn't lower your rankings on him because I think connected with Dak, he does put up decent numbers. But with even if Watson's there, we'll see how that kind of changes thing. How do you perceive Cooper's going to do over there in Cleveland, and that could be with or without Watson? No CeeDee Lamb to worry about.
Yeah, but I almost think that hurts him. Like he's going to have Jacoby Brissett more than likely throwing him the ball, which is a significant downgrade. See, I think without the other two receivers, like I looked at Cleveland's depth chart. I mean, like Donovan Peoples-Jones is like the only other guy there now, and so he's going to get the majority of double teams or top corners thrown at him. It's just a team they're gonna try and play these games, I believe, like 20-17, 24-21. It's not gonna be these are gonna be grinded out games for the Browns. They're not gonna try and put up a ton of points to try and win. At least that's my belief. So I I have to downgrade him.
$230 million guarantee. I'm just kidding. I mean, if Watson is there, I mean, I'm not going to forget about Cooper, but it definitely downgrades for sure.
Hey, if Deshaun Watson's playing, then I'll bump him up. But I just don't. I don't.
You don't think it's going to happen?
With Jacoby Brissett, I'm going to downgrade him.
Do we have to say every time we mention Deshaun, we should say every time we mention Deshaun Watson in any of the podcasts, we have to say 239 million guaranteed.
Fully guaranteed. Absolutely.
Fully
guaranteed.
So yeah, that's
not 40 million, not 50, not 100 million guaranteed. It's all guaranteed.
It's all guaranteed.
And they signed him despite all the allegations. It's wild and crazy.
Yeah, so that's something I think we should make a rule in the podcast for the rest of the podcast. Anytime
he's got to play. He's got to play.
He has to play.
It doesn't matter.
Exactly. But we have to mention every time we mention, something is with Deshaun Watson, we have to say just be funny for the podcast. Whoever says it, 239 million guaranteed, fully guaranteed. Just to say it would just be funny each time to say it. So.
Some of the last moves we'll talk about before we get to running backs, and we'll make it quick. Robert Woods ends up in Tennessee. Marquise Brown to Arizona. Allen Robinson to St. Louis. Todd, you always been a Robert Woods guy. Now no longer with the Rams. Now over in Tennessee. How does that sit with you?
Not really well, actually. You're I don't know.
Based on all those stats we just gave you about Tennessee.
I mean, just more based on the offense he's going to. I mean, you know,
but that's your boy.
I know.
You love Bobby Trees. You liked him better than the offensive player of the year in Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, well, did you know? Well, obviously, and it's probably the elephant in the room that I have Devontae Adams the number one wide receiver in fantasy and not Cooper. So let's.
Talking about last year? You're talking about this year?
I'm talking about this year because I said where I have him in my rankings. I have Adams as one, Cooper's two, but that's for a different podcast.
That's for a different show.
But for Robert Woods going to Tennessee, I don't know. Not the
research on that question that I gave you many days ago. You can't take a question I give you and be like, I don't know.
Well, it was
you don't like it, right? You don't like it.
I just don't like it. I just don't like it.
Gotcha.
That's why. Yeah.
He doesn't like it.
It smells. Eric, it smells bad. It smells real bad.
There you go. Mikey, do you like Allen Robinson going to St. Louis, taking over the spot of Robert Woods?
Well, he's going to LA, but Um,
What do you,
yeah,
then I said the Rams, right?
he said St. Louis.
Oh, sorry. Los Angeles Rams. Old habit. Continue.
I love it. I think he's a top 20 receiver.
Wow.
Wow, Allen Robinson, huh? You know how
Yeah,
bad he was last year?
I do. Believe me, I know how bad he was. I think I mentioned it a billion times on our weekly podcasts. But
Yes.
honestly, like if he's healthy, going to the Rams, there's like no better place to go. Like they consistently get the best out of their players on that offense. And he gets to slide into a role where he's got one of the best receivers playing on the opposite side of him. Like, Allen Robinson was a top 25 guy before last year when he was hurt. And this is the first time he's ever going to play with like an actual good quarterback. So I'm excited to see what he does. I am bullish on him. I think he can definitely be a top 20 guy.
Nice. I like that. I'll talk about Marquise Brown to Arizona. I love it. I kind of loved him last year before going in, and he kind of had a breakout year. And Kyler Murray, we had talked about DeAndre Hopkins going to be suspended for, I think, the first 6 games. And he's a guy that can go deep. He's good in open space. So I think he's going to be huge for Kyler Murray and that offense. So I'm kind of excited to see what Hollywood Brown does over there in Arizona. Just some last second guys. We won't talk about him because we're already behind the 8 ball. Devontae Parker to the Pats, probably be the number 1 guy. Juju Smith-Schuster and Marquez Valdez-Scantling to Kansas City. Jarvis Landry to the Saints, Sammy Watkins with the Packers, GJ Shark with the Lions. So all kinds of movement going on in the world of wide receivers. Not a lot in terms of the running backs, though. I guess everybody feels good about the running backs. I've having to spend money or draft them. But some of the guys we'll talk about: Chase Edmonds, Sony Michel, and Raheem Mostert. Not to mention Myles Gaskin, who was already there in Miami. But that's a loaded backfield, Miguel. Do you like any of these guys? Who should get drafted first? Do any of them even matter?
Edmonds should get drafted first. I mean, they kind of gave him the money. None of these, they're all going to get time at one point or another. You know, Mostert knows the system already because it's his running backs coach, basically, who's the new head coach now. So they're all going to have their value in some sort of way. But, oh man, there's not a reason to be really excited. But it's going to be between those two, I feel like, between Mostert and Edmonds. I would take Edmonds first.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, Todd, who would you prefer to lead the way? So if you were the coach, who would you decide should be the lead running back?
Mostert.
Really?
Yeah, just because I think just more because he did carry the load a little bit more in San Francisco. At times,
for like a half an hour before his knee exploded.
Very good. Yes, his knee exploded. Yeah, I don't know. I just think Mostert would be the more consistent back. But that's just me.
Edmonds, as Mikey mentioned, these are just some of the notes I had. Edmonds is the highest paid running back on the team. Mostert's injury prone, playing in just 1 game last year, and he's not even 100% right now, from what I read. Sony Michel was great for the Rams when Darrell Henderson went down, but then as soon as Cam Akers came back, Akers took over the lead role. Michel might be the only guy that can take a kind of a 3-back scenario, as we saw that Edmonds was given that role last year and got hurt, but he was probably the most effective. So we'll kind of see how it all kind of works. I'm not really excited about any of them, but you want running backs when you're drafting. So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. Or if anybody's, might be some trades when injuries start happening in the preseason or in spring training. So spring training, I always call it spring training camp.
Yep.
Still in baseball mode, even though my fantasy team sucks. Some last minute moves. Mike Davis, gosh, what a disappointment he was last year. He's now in Baltimore. Marlon Mack in Houston. Philip Lindsay in Indianapolis. Ronald Jones in Kansas City. Matt Breida with the Giants. Mikey, any of these guys matter?
I think Mike Davis kind of does. I mean, you have
Gus Edwards. Get out of here.
Look, hear me out on this. You've got 2 guys coming back, Witten Dobbins and Edwards, who are coming back off of major injuries.
Right.
So who's to say if they're going to be 100% going in? You got to trust in Baltimore's offense. Like They kind of do the same thing every year, and it always works. They're going to get the best out of Mike Davis if anybody's going to be able to do that.
Does it always work? Didn't he finish last in the division?
Yeah, but they still get the best out of their dudes. Like, I don't know. Like Marlon Mack, I couldn't go with. Like, when is Houston going to actually have the time to run the ball when they're not down 30-0?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. The answer is never Philip Lindsay. So
He was the answer for the Broncos a couple seasons.
I thought about Ronald Jones because like it could be a make or break year. I feel like for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Yeah. I mean, it's the third year, and he kind of hasn't like really lived up to that first round pick. So, and they like Jerick McKinnon too, so that's why I don't know if I don't know about Ronald Jones either.
He was pretty bad last year for Tampa. He was pretty good 2 years ago, but pretty much left in the dust by Leonard Fournette. Not real good. Todd, any of these guys you like?
I like Marlon Mack. Just because I think there was always, he wanted to always be the lead back, in Indianapolis, but obviously Jonathan Taylor came along, and Mack is kind of versatile too as well. He can catch the ball out of the backfield and everything like that. So again, yes, Mikey's point too. Yes, is he really going to be effective? When they're down 30, down 30, but hey, you can throw him the rock a little bit. So we'll see. But I like Mac, just
Okay.
maybe for a late sleeper or something.
I'll just mention these tight ends. If you guys want to say anything, you can. We don't have to. Some of the tight end movement in the offseason. OJ Howard, 1 year deal with the Bills. Obviously, Dawson Knox still currently the number one guy over there. Longtime Bengal CJ Uzama signs a 3-year deal with the Jets. Should be the starter over there with New York, but we've seen the problems the Jets had offensively. How about Giants tight end Evan Ingram? Finally in a new place after kind of an underwhelming career so far with the Giants. Now with the Jaguars. We'll battle with Dan Arnold, who had just 35 receptions last year. Last season, Ingram, just 46 receptions and 3 touchdowns. Best year came back in a rookie when he had 6 touchdowns. I sent you this info, but it was wrong. Titans signed 1 free agent. I said 2 on your list. We only signed 1, Austin Hooper. And then they gave Jeff Swain an extension. He was with the Titans last year. I don't know if that matters to anybody either, but there you go. Couple of you have OJ Howard to the Bills, CJ Uzama with the Jets, Evan Ingram to the Jaguars, and then you got Titans sign Austin Hooper and re-sign Jeff Swain. Anybody want any of those guys on your fantasy team this year? Maybe at some point when we're streaming for bye weeks.
Look, I would be willing to take a chance on Evan Ingram only because like we've seen the talent's always there. But he's never had a decent enough quarterback throwing him the ball for you to really know if it's ever going to turn out okay. And we don't know that Trevor Lawrence is that, but there's a better chance of that happening now that Urban Meyer's gone. So I'll just throw that out there.
Yeah, I agree with that too. CJ Uzama's had some good years in Cincinnati, but it's the Jets. They're still figuring things out with Zach Wilson. All right. Well, gentlemen. I can't even talk today. All right. Well, gentlemen, that's going to do it for this show. First one in the books here of the 2022 season. Mikey, we might have to make a new logo or at least update the logo because it says 20 on it. So we'll have to work on that. But that shouldn't be a problem.
No, it shouldn't be.
You don't have to create a new one. Just put in a 1 instead of another X.
Yeah, there you go. The NFL can be lazy with their Super Bowl logos, then I can be too.
That's well said, Mikey. Well said.
Well, it was good talking to you guys and starting to talk about some football. What are we going to have on our next show? Well, as we mentioned, the NFL draft. So it's going to be all about the 2022 NFL draft. We'll talk about rookies and all those wide receivers that went in the first round and what kind of fantasy impact. I love doing this show because we do a little more research on what, videos of what they look like in college. So we're always looking up on YouTube and seeing how these guys looked and trying to predict as so-called experts on who's going to make the biggest difference. So that should be exciting. Yeah. So guys, thanks for joining me on the show and hopefully we'll have another one real soon and talk about those rookies.
Yeah.
Woo. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, for Mikey Renault, Todd Diamond, I'm Eric Lansing. We'll see you next time on the MHA podcast.